please welcome to the stage the wonderful Arid Emmanuel
Invoices
MBE.
separate the men from the boys. Over here we measure success by how many people successful next to you. Here we say you broke if everybody is broke except for you.
Boss. Yes, there she is.
Hey. Oh, wow, I am loud. Hello, everybody. When I picked that walk-on track, I was in my feelings because the cash was flowing in the wrong direction. You know that where you're waiting for your hard-earned coins to hit your bank account, but you're like having to throw out money like this. And there's a line in this song that goes, everybody's bosses till it's time to pay for the office, till the invoices separate the men from the boys. And I was like, yeah, this is my walk-on song. It didn't actually relate at the time to what I was going to talk about. But then as I was fleshing out my talk, I was like, oh, actually, you know what? It does actually align, because you can get swept up in that, what I call buy one, get one free version of entrepreneurship that's sold online. You know, the one where you can work wherever you want, when you want, you can earn millions, and all you have to do is spend 16 hours a week, have a free Canva account, doesn't have to be paid, and then you can buy, well, it is now, new AI software that's going to do everything else. And I'm like, that manifest and it will come version of entrepreneurship has never been my experience. My experience has been very much about what I'm going to talk to you about today, which is grit, grace, and gratitude. And I'm going to go through this. I've got my notes because I need them, because I have these two new friends. They joined me about 6 months to a year ago. One is called Perry, and she has a friend called Menno. And when they get together, the bitches keep pressing pause on my thoughts. I'm like, I need that word. And they've got me sounding like Eminem in these streets. My name is. Only Eminem knew what his name was. It says Slim Shady. I'm just stuck on my name is. I'm really glad that I have some people in the room who get where I am coming from, because the struggle is real, man. The struggle is real. So I'm here not to talk about my new besties, but to talk about grit, grace, and gratitude. And I'm going to start with grit. Now, if I were to personify grit, it would be the musician, the actor, and the entrepreneur, 50 Cent. And I would personify grit as 50 Cent because grit keeps you up at night. Grit is something that gets the job done, and grit barely flinches in chaos. Grit is like your inner engine. It's more than being resilient. To me, grit is more about it's more about faith and motion. So grit is what you have when you've got no money, no followers, no connections, and a vision that nobody else but you can see. But grit, to me, at least for me, has been born from the birthplace of trauma. And so when that grit is left unchecked as leaders, it can stagnate your business just as quickly as it got you started. And I say that because I've lived it. And so a little bit about my story. So I was made in Nigeria, but born in the UK, the Northeast, Newcastle, to be specific. Yes, home to Cheryl Cole and Geordie Shore. And Ant and Dec, let's not forget Ant and Dec. I'm the first generation immigrant. I'm the eldest of two. Entered this world into quite a privileged little family. My mum worked for the NHS all of her life until she retired, and my dad worked in finance, and we lived in quite a leafy little neighborhood in the Northeast, and we had a nanny, and my brother and I, we always called her Nana. Although, as you can see, she's the one in the stripy cardigan. We were not blood related or anything, but we called her Nana. And at that time, I would say, when I think back to those days in the 80s, rollerblades, fame, and wham are what come to mind. But like many of you, I suspect, in this room, that whole perfect life of mine imploded. And so the Northeast was also a hotbed of the National Front. And so whereas when I'd spend time at home with my mum, when I'd go to where my nana lived, they were rife there. So where my songs, where Wham used to be played in my bedroom, I'd hear another chant, "There's no black on the Union Jack, so pull that trigger and shoot that nigger," became a daily chant that I would hear on my way to school. My parents separated, and my dad disappeared without a trace. And I remember that day quite clearly, actually. I was coming home from school with my mum. And it's not funny, so I don't know why I'm smiling, but there was a for sale sign in the garden. And I remember saying to my mum, "Are we moving?" And her saying, "I don't know." And he'd remortgaged the house to the point where he couldn't pay for it, and it was being repossessed. And he'd skedaddled. And so my mum was there with 2 kids now, homeless within 30 days, and isolated, because she didn't, they married, she came from Nigeria to be with him, so she was isolated now, and pretty much having to find her own way. And so she moved to London not long after that, and my brother and I, we moved in to stay with my nana. And she then received up close and personal what racism was like, having 2 black children in her household. So she'd regularly have people throwing stones and shit at her window. And I don't know why they do it, but they do it when it was during Coronation Street. And she loved Coronation Street. She was like Vera Duckworth, but without the jack. She was a real battle axe. But then she'd always get vexed. They're bloody doing it again. Coronation Street is on. And if it wasn't Coronation Street, it was Dallas. But that's not the point. She learned up close. You see, this is where my thoughts are going. She learned up close and personal what racism was about. And it ended up costing her two sons who refused to relate with her because she had 2 darkies in her household. So that was the price that she paid for racism. So racism was the air that I breathed during my childhood. I don't recall a day when I didn't experience it, whether it was covert or more, whether it was overt or more covert, where I wasn't being honored, where I was being othered, rather. And so living in that atmosphere of constant fear is really traumatic in itself. But then when you add to that the layers that you feel when your parents separate, such as rejection, and it impacts your self-worth. How many people do we have in the audience of divorced parents? Actually, you don't. Oh, you raise your hand. Yeah. So you get what I mean. You feel that it's about you, that you've done something wrong. So you mix that all up together. So needless to say, school was a blur of Diamond White and Diamond Blush and Woodpecker Cider and AHA mixed in with serious depression, which went unchecked because we didn't have mental health services back then, suicide attempts, and then dashed hopes of marrying Bobby Brown when he married Whitney. But to be fair, I think I looked out on that one, given how it all ended up, right? So I left school with no GCSEs, so my mum still thinks to this day I got A stars because I faked my certificate. You know when you get your little transcript? I Tipex everything out. I did what I needed to do. She thinks she has an A-star daughter. She does not. And I got an F for business studies, ironically, which at the time stood for failure for me, but later stood for founder, thank God. But nonetheless, I came out of my childhood feeling very traumatized, feeling very rejected, and very much an outsider. And so the behaviors that I built around that were to become fiercely independent. And I'd use that word all the time. I'm fiercely independent. I was very defensive because I was hurt. And I was also incredibly resilient to the point of isolation. And I didn't know then that those feelings would essentially become the fuel that I would need to start my business, my first business. I say my first business because I was the CEO of many failed attempts before this one. That I built started rather from a desk under my stairs as a single mum. So Diva Apprenticeships was essentially fueled by grit. And it was, we delivered apprenticeships, we helped thousands of young people to build their careers in the creative industries through government-backed apprenticeships and paid internships. And we worked with all of the major brands and record labels behind a lot of the content that you're watching online or you're streaming via Spotify. And I was really good at my job. I won awards. King Charles invited me to his gaff so I could pick up my MBE, no less for thank you, I'll take my bow. No less for further education in the creative industries, though they don't even give you water when you go to collect your MBE. There's no snacks, nothing. And you can't take pictures, so we took pictures. But you're not supposed to take pictures. But that's essentially the highlight reel. I did what I needed to do to build a successful business. Now, I always think that grit is like that startup phase, right? So when I had no funding, it worked. When I had no plan B, it worked. And when I had no clue what I was doing, it worked. But when it came to scaling my business and building my team, grit on its own wasn't enough. In fact, it made the process so much harder. So on the outside, I was this charismatic leader. I could charm my way in to have a seat at the tables that I needed to be at. But on the inside, and I mean that inside me personally, but also inside my business, I was in the trenches. I was barely hanging on, and I was an absolute nightmare to work with. The coping mechanisms that had got me to fuel my drive, I guess, and my ambition were now just having a huge impact on my team. So because I was traumatized, I was more confrontational than I was direct. I couldn't self-regulate my emotions. I could go from 0 to 100 real quick. Because I feared rejection, I didn't know how to ask for help. I had to be able to do everything. Because I lacked self-worth, I took everything serious, everything personally. Like everything was about me. You could be telling me a story about someone that I didn't know, and I would find a way to center myself in that story and make it about something that I had done wrong. And because I was fiercely independent, I was so afraid of failure, and I could trust no one but myself. Now, I say this like there's balance in everything, so being resilient is a good thing, and you need that definitely in business, and being able to back yourself is also really important. But if you're way off kilter, it actually starts to hinder your progress. So I never shared plans with anyone. So how in the business, how's your team supposed to know where they're going if you're not prepared to share plans? And I'd shy off delegating because of that adage. If you want a job doing, do it yourself. I'm like, nobody read the small print when they get that adage, which is, this will lead to burnout. And so I was the micromanagement queen. And I was out in these streets helping organizations to recruit and to retain talent. But inside my own company, I was like, fast track towards Toxic Work Culture of the Year award. And I mean, think about how many people are running a business here, or you're leading a team, or you're thinking about doing it. Yeah, and leave your hand up now if within that business you are the CEO, the managing director, the chief marketing officer, the HR director, the bookkeeper, the cleaner sometimes, and then on other days you're trying to be some kind of Mel Robbins-y type motivational person to lift up whoever is feeling down. And you can be wearing any one of those hats in any conversation that you're having. And then think about it, like how many people know how much it's costing you to hold and to juggle all of that? Because it's heavy. And when we're not mixing grit with grace towards ourselves, we start to leak that heaviness, we start to leak that stress, we start to leak that trauma onto everything that we touch, whether that's your team, your clients, your creativity, your family, it starts to impact your work culture. And as leaders, we set the weather for our organization. We set the tone. People are impacted by our energy. So think about that manager who you think you wish you never met. They're setting your experience. And so it's important that we bring in grace. And when I'm talking about grace in the context of business, I'm not talking like, oh yes, let's be flirty, which is fine if that's how you want. It's not floaty. Grace is about power, not passivity. In business, that grace means holding space for your full humanity, for all of your flaws, your fears. This is what you're showing yourself in all. It's about emotional regulation. Grace is what keeps your past pain from becoming someone else's present problem. And we know there are many leaders who are making their pain our problem. And so in practice, all the words are there. Okay, you know the answers to the questions. So in practice, when I did this at home, I was clicking. But when I at home, we're in a tent. So in practice, in moments of conflict, just pretend that grace isn't there. Grace defends your actions, right? Where grace does what? Yes. You are my people. During uncertainty, grace says, figure it out yourself. You've got it sorted. You don't need to ask for help. You're supposed to know what it is you need to know. But grace says, exactly, is your ego bigger than your bank account, is what my coach used to say to me. When you're feeling overwhelmed, especially when you're looking at social media and it looks like everybody else is bossing their life better than you, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm like perimenopausal and I still haven't got my stuff together. You know, grit will say push through, where grace says pause. You know, like as my mom would say, face your front, be about your own business. And then when emotions are running high, grit is quick to react. So when you get that news that you don't want to hear, or somebody's done something that you didn't expect them to do, and you react. Grace is the breath that you take to self-regulate and then respond from a place of truth and not trauma. And when you're running on empty, grit expects your team to thrive off your fumes. Whereas grace empowers your team through delegating effectively. And delegating is not, oh, go do that, and then you stand over someone's shoulder like that, and you're thinking, you're not doing that how I would do it, so like, now let me do it. And then you wonder why they keep coming back and asking questions. Oh, should I do this? Should I do this? Well, can't you think for yourself? Well, no, every time I think for myself, you've done it for me. So, and you have that back and forth. It's about making sure people have context. It's about making sure that people know what the vision is, what the budget is, who they need to contact, what your communication style is, what the deadlines are, and how they need to feed that back. And then let them do the job that you have paid them to do. That is grace. And so the concept, she's speaking now, I'm like legit speaking from experience. So the concept of grace slapped me right upside the head with an email. I'd done hiring rule number 1, which is I'd broken hiring rule number 1, which is hire slow, fire fast. So I had hired fast, and then I don't like delivering bad news, so I was taking my time to work them out. But I knew as I was making the offer that this person was not the right person, but I was stressed. So I made the hire. Obviously, it didn't work. I knew it didn't work after a couple of weeks, but I longed it out in the vain hope a miracle would happen. It didn't. We got to the end of probation. What did my girl do? She extended the contract, just in case. And at the end of that time, I said, you know what, let's go our separate ways. He did not take it very well. And this was on a Friday. So come Monday morning, we used to always have our meetings on a Monday morning. team meetings, and he timed his email really well. So the meetings were at 10. So we got this email around about 9:30. So it was enough time for people to settle in, go through into their inbox. And what he did was he had sent an email where he'd essentially talked about his experience in the business, but then gave a very unflattering review, should we say, on me, which also included things that people in the business had said about me. And so I was mortified as I went into this meeting with my little iPad and an elephant next to me. And the elephant kept tapping me, saying, "Are we going to address the email?" And I was like, "No, we're not going to address the email. I've got a whole agenda." And I can see people are looking at me thinking, "But there's an elephant. Are we going to address the elephant?" No, we're not going to address the elephant. So this was the shortest meeting that I'd ever had. I went back to my desk. I put fictitious meetings in my diary for the rest of that day and Tuesday morning. And I went home and I cried. And I cried and I cried because at first I was a little bit like indignant, like it was embarrassing. But then I thought, he didn't tell you anything that you didn't already know, and the fact that I had created this environment where no one could feed back made me feel worse. So I had an advisor at the time, Paul, and he just had this real knack of giving bad news in a really nice way, so you still felt like, oh, I'm being valued, and yeah, you're agreeing. And he essentially told me about myself. And so I had to go back. I had to go back on Wednesday, call a meeting, and hold myself accountable and apologize. And also think about how I was going to continue to operate within the business. Because grace is what transforms your leadership from one that's reactive to one that's more responsive. So it's a difference between having a team that survives, and that is surviving you as their leader, and a team that is thriving and developing under your leadership. So I had to unpack my triggers. I had to get real with myself and own the fact that not every disagreement is a declaration of war, that I had to give myself permission to not be perfect, to not be number one. It was all right to be number two. And that's what grace does. It invites you to lead from the inside out. And I also had to change the measures. And I encourage, when I'm working with leaders, to do this, is that we have all these measures for our business that relate to profit, that relate to performance, but we don't really measure ourselves on how we're developing people. So I had to include within my business, success, how people were feeling, progression rates, retention, development, who was becoming a better, more equipped, successful individual because they'd been working in my business. And that very much informs what I do now through my much smaller affair, because I sold Diva, and through my consultancy work. And that led to the creation of a leadership event, the High Potential Talent Summit, which helps leaders go beyond the strategy into exploring how people and profit can coexist, because work in tangent within their business. So here's a challenge for you as we shimmy towards the end, is you can take a screenshot of this and ask yourself in your next quiet time, what's one pattern or belief you're carrying as a leader that served the old you but doesn't serve the leader you're becoming? Now, finally, I want to end on a bit of gratitude because gratitude to me is our superpower as leaders. It's like insurance. It keeps you grounded when the metrics are not lining up with the vision and the mission. And this is what gratitude looks like for me. It looks like spending time with my daughter, with my community, and freedom. And that's not freedom in the kind of Insta, Bali type kind of way. If that's your vibe, that's your vibe. But for me, it's more about freedom just to lead in a way that is true to who I am, and that doesn't require burnout, and that doesn't require bitterness. And this is one of my favorite scriptures, because I think building a business or leading a team is really hard, and it's very isolating. And the stuff that people talk about, that we see online doesn't really reflect the reality of what's going on. And often we focus on particularly when we have this vision and plan on over there, that we forget about what are some of the wins that we've already had. So I want you, as I'm starting to wrap up, to close your eyes for a minute. I'm not going to do anything woo-woo. And I want you to just think back to like 3 years, 3 or 5 years, or go like pre-pandemic if you want to. I want you to think about what you were asking for then, or what you were praying for then, that you're living in right now, that you've experienced. You can open your eyes now, but I think make a note of it if you can, whether you've got your phone. Because that thing that once felt impossible is like something that you're experiencing now. And so often we like ask for these things, they come and we bat them away because we're on to the next thing. But when I was building Diva, we won a contract to deliver what was called the Brits Apprenticeship Scheme. So the Brit Music Awards, the proceeds for that go into a charity. And so I'd been knocking on the door of the music industry saying, come on, man, do apprenticeships. And they finally said, all right. And so they gave us some money to do this apprenticeship scheme. And I remember ringing my business coach at the time, and he's like, savor it. Go and do something to mark this occasion, because when you get the next slap upside your head, you're going to need something to remind you what you've done. So I started to keep a little gratitude jar where I just write in my wins and successes. And on my desktop, it's called a Why I'm Hot folder, because I'm extra. But trust me, when you're feeling pretty crap and you've got this folder that says Why I'm Hot, you're like, oh yeah, I do good stuff. I do good stuff. Anyway, so that's the grit, grace, and gratitude model. Grit gets you started. And it keeps you, and grace is what keeps you sane, but it's a gratitude that really helps you grow. And thinking about yourselves as leaders, think about where you are. Are you operating more in your grit area? Can we be looking at mixing some grace there? Because your team are feeling it, even if you're not speaking it out. And so if you want to keep in touch with me, please do. Or please come to my event on the 13th of November. You have a QR code. I'm loving these QR codes. So this is where I have taken this grit, grace, and gratitude model and turned it into an event. It's just a small event hosted by Sony Music Entertainment in King's Cross. And we bring in that. It underpins what I've been talking about. And it's for leaders who are looking to build much more people-centered workplaces where, like I said earlier, people and profit can intertwine. And my friend Michelle here, she's hosting. So, and keep in touch. Follow me everywhere. Thank you.
Make some noise for Arit Emmanuel!